Brian proposed that the hospital should be conveniently accessible by foot as he unexpectedly helped Frances out of the car. In the midst of these unforeseen circumstances, I found myself in the passenger seat while Brian took the wheel. "We've made amends with Dad, and we're heading off for a trip to Florida, just the four of us," he declared as we set out. This revelation left me momentarily speechless, grappling with the abrupt shift in plans. Frances's hoarse voice brought me back to reality. At that moment, my sole focus was ensuring she reached the hospital safely. I quickly hailed a taxi for her. Inside, a flame of bitterness flared up towards Brian and his mother for their apparent disregard for our family. I silently vowed to find a way to settle the score for their actions. "I'm Lauren, a 40-year-old woman married to Brian, who is 42 and works in an office. Our daughter, Frances, 11, prefers the solace of her books during quiet moments. My job limits my social life, as I have always prioritized my career over socializing. However, at 31, I attended a matchmaking event with a friend where I met Brian. He spoke of his dedication to work, which had led him to miss out on personal opportunities. We felt an instant connection, quickly began dating, and eventually married, welcoming Frances into our lives. Things changed when Brian suddenly announced that his mother would be moving in with us. I was shocked by this unexpected decision, especially considering my desire for privacy and space within our family. Brian's parents had a disagreement, prompting his mother to seek refuge with us. I was reluctant about this arrangement, worried about how it would affect our family dynamics. When I voiced my concerns, Brian seemed offended, interpreting my hesitation as an aversion to living with his mother. Fearing his reaction, I kept my doubts to myself. Amid the turmoil of these family dynamics, I found myself facing the challenge of keeping peace in our home while managing the unexpected arrival of Brian's mother and the unfolding events that tested our family's strength. Brian asserted that I shouldn't argue, confidently instructing me to prepare a room for his mother. Our living situation, however, was complicated. As tenants, adding another person to our lease required the landlord's approval, a process I needed to navigate since I received housing benefits through my job. Additionally, our apartment had only 3 bedrooms, one for Frances, one for us, and no extra space. Despite these limitations, Brian suggested, with little regard, that we move Frances's study area to the living room. He justified this by claiming it would help us supervise her homework better, arguing that an elementary school child didn't need a private room. This startling proposal left me in disbelief. How could he prioritize his mother's comfort over our daughter's needs? Brian's lack of response to my objections, which I raised repeatedly, deeply frustrated me. When Frances returned home, he quickly informed her that she would need to clear her room for her grandmother. As she began moving her belongings, I felt a mix of sorrow and growing resentment towards Brian. He had recently been neglecting household duties and financial contributions, often coming home late. I had tolerated his behavior for Frances's sake, but his latest actions felt like the last straw. Upon my mother-in-law's arrival, she promptly expressed her dissatisfaction with our living arrangements, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, putting me in an uncomfortable position. I had confirmed with property management that her stay didn't require formal procedures, just a notification, hoping her visit would be short. However, the size of her luggage indicated a longer stay. Further disheartening me, she ignored my feelings, critiquing our home and commenting on the lack of food in the fridge, implying I was not meeting my family's needs. Despite my plans to grocery shop, her unexpected visit forced me to prioritize cleaning, leaving no time for shopping. Brian's preference for takeout, coupled with his snide remarks about my cooking, had already discouraged me from preparing meals. When I suggested ordering food to ease the situation, my mother-in-law reacted angrily, dismissing the idea and insisting on traditional expectations for me to prepare a full meal. Following her demands, she left me to manage on my own, her laughter echoing from the living room as I prepared to shop. Feeling disheartened, this sequence of events, characterized by a lack of consideration for my feelings and our daughter's well-being, heightened the tension in our home, prompting me to reflect on the dynamics of family respect and responsibility in challenging circumstances. Returning home to find Frances diligently working on her homework in the living room under my mother-in-law's critical eye was disheartening. Her harsh reprimands for any mistakes Frances made, calling her a disappointment, were painful to witness. I intervened, reminding her that educational standards have changed, with children now learning subjects like English and programming from a young age. Despite my defense, my mother-in-law continued her derogatory comments, wishing Frances had inherited more of Brian's intelligence. Watching Frances's spirit dampen, I reassured her to proceed at her own pace while casting a disapproving glance at my mother-in-law, who remained indifferent, munching snacks as if to provoke me. A week into my mother-in-law's stay, my patience began to fray. I confronted Brian, unable to endure his mother's behavior, particularly its negative impact on Frances. However, Brian dismissed my concerns, downplaying the situation and attributing Frances's struggles in school to her interactions with me rather than himself. This only strengthened my determination to advocate for our daughter for the first time. I stood my ground while my mother-in-law pretended to be helpful in Brian's presence. Her actual contributions were non-existent, leaving me with the entire burden of household chores. This charade only added to my frustration, further emphasizing Brian's cluelessness about the real dynamics at home. My confrontation with Brian reached a tipping point when I questioned his priorities, insisting that Frances's well-being should take precedence over catering to his mother. In response, Brian mocked my nursing background, insinuating that my profession somehow linked to Frances's struggles. This comment struck me deeply, but I masked my hurt with laughter, suppressing the anger and pain bubbling beneath the surface. The situation deteriorated when Frances fell ill, exhibiting symptoms of a virus spreading through her school. As I was preparing to take her to the hospital, Brian casually revealed his plans to go to Florida with his parents, mentioning it at the last minute. His blatant disregard for our daughter's health was the final straw. Amid the chaos of ensuring Frances received the care she needed, Brian and his mother shocked me by stating how close the hospital was, choosing to leave for their vacation without a second thought about Frances's condition. This act of abandonment during a crucial moment starkly illuminated the misaligned priorities and lack of compassion that had come to define our family dynamic, prompting me to reflect deeply on the values and responsibilities we uphold as a family. Just as Frances's voice, filled with regret, brought me back to the harsh reality, I realized what I had to do. Nothing else mattered as I called for a taxi to hurry her to the hospital. A wave of anger washed over me, an anger I promised to keep alive. Brian and his family had no idea how far I was willing to go to protect my loved ones. I felt betrayed, blaming them for taking us for granted. 2.5 hours later, my phone kept vibrating with calls from Brian. Reluctantly, I answered, only to hear his frantic pleas for help after a car accident on his way to the airport. Although he had a license for manual cars, his confidence had diminished due to his reliance on public transport. Too proud to admit his unease about driving a manual in front of his mother, he found himself in a tough spot. While our insurance covered both of us, the accident was his responsibility since he had taken the car without my permission. He tried to shift the blame onto the vehicle, complaining that it was hard to drive and inefficient, but I wouldn't have it. I reminded him that he knew it was a manual and had opted to take it anyway. The fault rested with him, not the car, and I made it clear he was liable for the repair costs for both the car and any damages, like hitting a guardrail. Upon our arrival at the hospital, my focus remained solely on Frances, who required additional tests. The situation was more serious than the flu making its rounds, and I couldn't afford to let Brian's selfish demands distract me, so I ignored his constant calls. A message notification caught my eye. Initially, I feared that Brian's parents were siding with him. However, while his mother sent frantic messages, his father simply asked about the situation. Curious, I chose to respond only to his father, leading to an unexpected revelation. Brian's dad was unaware of any trip to Florida, having spent the day with friends. His wife's frantic messages regarding the accident initially seemed like a plea for attention until he realized the seriousness of the matter. When Brian reached out, puzzled by my selective responses, I explained the full situation. His reaction to learning about his mother's stay with us and the fabricated story of a family trip to Florida unveiled a complex family dynamic filled with misunderstandings and disconnects. My conversation with Brian's father revealed a reality marked by separation, miscommunication, and the unintended consequences of actions driven by pride and negligence. As we navigated these revelations, my unwavering focus remained on Frances's health, underscoring the crucial importance of family and the lengths one must go to protect and support loved ones amid chaos. In a voice more somber than I had ever heard from him, Brian uttered the word unforgivable, sending a shiver down my spine. About half an hour after our call ended, a doctor summoned me to discuss Frances's diagnosis. She was suffering from acute gastroenteritis and needed to be admitted to the hospital for treatment. A wave of relief washed over me, mixed with guilt for the stress Frances had endured. Fortunately, a private room was available, providing her with a quiet space to recover. "Francis, how are you feeling? We managed to get a private room so you can rest comfortably," I said, trying to infuse optimism into my voice. Francis, filled with regret, apologized. Worried about falling behind in her studies due to her hospitalization, I quickly reassured her, emphasizing that her worth to me wasn't tied to academic performance. She was simply my beloved daughter. The atmosphere lightened when Francis's grandfather visited. Their special bond and his stories about Francis's accomplishments, like winning a drawing contest, brought a much-needed sense of normalcy and joy to both of us. However, this brief moment of respite was interrupted by a call from Brian and his mother, who were now late for their flight to Florida due to the car accident. They demanded I reimbursed them for the travel costs incurred as they blamed me for their situation. Brian's mother expressed her regret about the missed chance to reconcile with her husband, her loud grievances echoing through the phone as if on speaker. Just then, my father-in-law, who had come to support us at the hospital, casually pointed out that he was unaware of any planned trip to Florida, drawing attention to the absence of an additional participant in their itinerary. This news clearly surprised both Brian and his mother, especially when they realized he was with me, leading to a flurry of excuses. Brian's mother quickly fabricated a story, claiming the trip was intended as a private outing between her and Brian, a blatant attempt to retract their earlier falsehoods. Her weak justifications only served to further erode her credibility. I couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculousness of their situation, amazed at how swiftly their deceit had unraveled in light of unexpected revelations. When I discovered the booking for 4 on the travel website, it was evident that their silence was their only defense. Frances had hinted that her grandmother had tampered with my computer, raising my suspicions. A quick check confirmed that my mother-in-law had indeed booked a trip for 4 under my name, with charges already appearing on my credit card. Brian's gripes about cancellation fees seemed absurd, considering I was the one financially impacted by their scheme. The tension escalated when I inquired about the identity of the third person, which Brian clumsily blamed on a misunderstanding. Determined to address the issue head-on, I set up a meeting at a nearby diner, entrusting Frances to the capable staff at the hospital. Accompanied by my father-in-law, we awaited Brian and his mother's arrival. Upon their entrance, Brian immediately started complaining about the damages to the guardrail, insisting that I should use my insurance to cover it. I was taken aback by his audacity, reminding him that he was accountable for the damages due to his negligence. My mother-in-law attempted to redirect the conversation to the purpose of our meeting, but I seized the opportunity to reveal that the dash cam in my car had recorded not just Brian and his mother, but also an unfamiliar young woman in the back seat. This footage, accessible through an advanced app linked to my phone, unintentionally provided irrefutable evidence of Brian's infidelity. Their shock was palpable as I confronted Brian about his plans to take his mistress on the trip, sarcastically thanking him for leaving such clear evidence. I had suspected his unfaithfulness and contemplated divorce, but the recent chaos, including my mother-in-law's interference and Frances's illness, had delayed my decision. The revelation prompted my father-in-law to comment on the unfortunate resemblance between mother and son, exposing his wife's affair with a younger man. Brian, oblivious to his mother's indiscretions, looked visibly stunned, while my mother-in-law's embarrassment was apparent for all to see. Exhausted by the deception and betrayal, I declared my intention to divorce Brian, demanding he take responsibility for child support, car repair costs, and the expenses for the aborted Florida trip, including those linked to his mistress. Brian, confronted with the seriousness of his actions and the public exposure of both his and his mother's affairs, bowed his head, acknowledging the repercussions of his choices in front of witnesses. Feeling cornered, he hastily offered to settle all expenses, begging me not to expose his secret. He admitted that his affair was with the daughter of a significant client, who remained unaware of his marital status. Intrigued by her wealth, my mother-in-law had suggested a joint vacation, thinking nothing of it. The young woman genuinely believed in the trip, while Brian, reveling in her admiration, had caused a car accident due to his reckless driving. My father-in-law and I could hardly believe the foolishness that led to this incident. Brian promised he would handle the situation with his mistress independently, fearing the fallout at work if it became known that he had misled the client's daughter. He implored me for discretion, claiming his previous support during our marriage deserved some leniency. I agreed but made it clear that he needed to adhere to my terms, emphasizing there would be no future forgiveness. After our divorce, I secured a fair settlement for child support. However, the drama didn't end there. Later, Brian reached out to me in a panic, concerned that the president of his client's company was demanding an apology from me, mistakenly believing I had exposed the affair. This situation led me to reflect on my past choices. I then revealed to Brian an unexpected twist. The truth about his affair had surfaced on its own. As a car enthusiast, I had my vehicle serviced at the client's auto parts company, where his daughter worked. She recognized the car and uncovered the truth herself. Thus, I hadn't violated any promise to keep the affair confidential. Brian's predicament worsened when the mistress, upon seeing her supposed boyfriend's car at her father's shop, realized the deception. After explaining the accident and the need for repairs to her father, the deceit unraveled, ultimately reaching Brian's employer and leading to his professional downfall. Confronted with the loss of his job, home, and reputation, Brian mourned his fate, a direct consequence of his choices. I firmly ended the call, ensuring I blocked his number this time, and resolved to move on from the entire ordeal. As for Brian, his career and personal life spiraled downward. He was terminated due to the scandal and financial misconduct, and burdened with debts from the settlement. He had no choice but to resign. His mother, now dependent on him and unable to work due to her age, found herself in a dire situation, forced to share a modest, low-cost apartment. The divorce had left them without any division of property, plunging them into financial hardship. Brian's extravagant tastes, despite their dire circumstances, led to severe arguments and even police involvement. His mother had to take on part-time work, a harsh reality for them, but given their past actions, there was little sympathy from others. In contrast, life for Francis and me continued smoothly. As the primary provider, our lifestyle remained stable and secure. Francis's artistic talents blossomed, and her grades improved, particularly in art. She expressed an interest in pursuing a creative career, a path I wholeheartedly supported, understanding the challenges it might entail. Francis's recent achievement of winning first place in an art contest only reaffirmed her talent. Despite the divorce, she maintained a warm relationship with her grandfather, visiting him regularly and preserving the family bond. I was grateful for my former father-in-law's support and hoped for his continued well-being. Now it's just Francis and me, forging ahead with our lives, unburdened by the past and looking forward to a future filled with promise and the freedom to chase our dreams. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again in the next video. Stay amazed.